So moving on to the vaccines that we have available and what's happening in the world with vaccines. So this is a basic table of what's going on with vaccine approvals around the world, at least at the FDA, the European Medicines Agency, and Health Canada. You can see that in Canada, we have 4 vaccines that have been approved. 3 of them are available commercially right now: the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, and the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine being available very, very shortly. So let's look a little bit about what these vaccines are. So thanks to Unambiguous Science, which is a very nice blog about science for the general reader, this is a great table that I found that describes the vaccines in a bit of detail. So the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines are the mRNA vaccines that were available last month, the last time we met. So you can go back to the last webinar to listen to a little bit more about it. More recently, the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine is an adenovirus vector vaccine, as is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. What that means is that they use the shell or the skeleton of an adenovirus, which is a very common virus that we see all over in the environment, but they take the contents of the virus out. It's not replicating, so it can't cause disease. It's not a live vaccine, and neither is the mRNA vaccine. And they put in the genetic material required to create antibodies to the spike protein in COVID-19. And so what happens when you inject this vaccine is the adenovirus skeleton enters your cells and makes your cell produce the antibody to the vaccine. These vaccines have been tried on tens of thousands of people in the clinical trial setting, and clearly since the clinical trials on millions and millions of people around the world. So very, very well studied, even for vaccines. Although everything went very quickly, they really didn't skimp on the number of patients in these clinical trials. And so the efficacy and the safety described in those clinical trials, the numbers are still very, very rigorous and very well done. You'll often see this, and I know we've all seen this table floating around on social media, on Facebook and elsewhere, that it appears that the adenovirus vaccines appear to be less effective, less efficacious in the trials than the mRNA vaccines. And I would argue, and I'll explain why in a second, you should not be looking at that. And we know as researchers that you really should not be comparing outcomes across clinical trials. And I'll explain very clearly and give you examples of why we shouldn't do that, particularly with the vaccine trials for COVID-19. What I think is most important are these numbers, and that's efficacy against severe disease, meaning prevention of hospitalization, ICU admission, and death. And you can see that generally all the vaccines work pretty well 100%. And although this was 75% in the Pfizer trial, I'll tell you that the more recent data from the real world, with good data coming from Israel for the Pfizer vaccine, that this is above 95% as well. So all 4 of these vaccines really do the job at preventing severe COVID-19 hospitalization and death. And that's really the outcome that you want to prevent. It doesn't really matter if COVID-19 causes a cold, or flu-like symptoms in you, as long as you don't end up in hospital or you don't die. So the key here is preventing severe disease, not really preventing any symptoms at all.